And good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Lisa Jane Morissette, Operations Manager for KPBS Radio. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this very exclusive opportunity to hear from travel host and activist Rick Steves. We are running a little bit behind this evening because Rick, in modern times, like all of us, is having a little connectivity issue, but he should be joining us shortly. We assure you, we just talked to him on the phone. So please hang out with us. You are here for our KPBS Insider event with Rick Steves. Again, thank you again for joining us. So before we start our program with Rick, and as we're waiting on him, we have some fun polling questions inspired by the series. So as we let folks enter the webinar and get settled in, including Rick, we're going to give you some of these questions. So question number one for you. Are you planning a trip to Europe in the next year? So those of you who have joined us already, go ahead and give your answers. Are you going on a trip to Europe in the next year? Let us know what you're thinking. Many of you might be thinking about it. Many of you might still be scared, thinking about COVID. Yeah. Yes, no, maybe. And we have, it's about 50-50. We've got 43% saying yes, 23% said no, and about 34% thinking about it. So a lot of people between thinking about it and yes, they are going to Europe in the next year. Let's move on to our next question. Oh, wait, here he is, the man of the hour, Rick Steves. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
So we were just going through our first polling question, Rick. We just asked the crowd if they were going on a trip to Europe in the coming year. Most of them said yes, they're going, with a lot of them saying, I'm thinking about it.
Well, we've got some time to talk about the pros and cons and what it's like to be traveling right now in Europe. I'm just getting over jet lag from a great trip.
Let's go ahead and go to our next polling question. How much time does Rick spend in Europe each year? What do we think? Is it 4 weeks? That's only a month. I don't think that's enough. 8 weeks? That seems like a lot. 12 weeks? Seems like even more. And 16 weeks. So what do we think? Rick, what do you think people are going to guess?
I bet they're going to guess 12 weeks because that's what it is.
No, you're giving away the answer.
I gave it away. There we go.
Oh,
I wish I had 16 weeks, but I spend 12 weeks, about a third of the time making television shows for public television, a third of the time working with my guided tours, and a third of the time updating my guidebooks. And I just love it.
Great. Okay, what's our next one? Okay, you can find Rick's travel programs on, and of course, you can have more than one answer. KPBS television, KPBS radio, on demand, on the PBS video app, or Rick Steves podcast, or all of the above. What are people thinking? I know I watch you on demand on the PBS video app using my Passport subscription.
Very nice.
Yes.
I love that. It's available on demand. It's so cool with Passport. You can just, whatever the spirit moves you, you can go there. Thanks to
all of
Passport.
the above. Yes, most people got it right. That's right. 91% said all of the above, and that is the correct answer. Congratulations, everyone.
It was a trick question and nobody got tricked, almost.
And I think we've got, that's it. That's all for the polling questions. Hopefully everybody's settled in and ready for this evening with Rick. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Rick, for this special event. Many of these people that are here tonight are great supporters of public broadcasting, so we appreciate them so much.
Wonderful.
Rick Steves is, of course, a popular public television host, a best-selling guidebook author, and an outspoken activist who encourages Americans to broaden their perspectives through travel. He's the founder and owner of Rick Steves Europe, a travel business with a tour program that brings more than 30,000 people to Europe annually. So again, thank you again for joining us and all of our great supporters. So you just said you got some jet lag. So you just got back from Europe, I'm guessing.
That's right. I was just filming. We're just finishing up an exciting project. It's been kind of a 2-year project. We're making a 6-hour miniseries celebrating the art of Europe from the prehistoric cave paintings all the way to Picasso.
Wow, that's great. So what was it like for you to get back over there again? How long were you away from Europe?
You know, when COVID hit, we were just euphoric. I worked with 100 people at Rick Steves Europe. I had 100 of my guides in Europe right here in my living room. We were just coming off our best year ever. That nothing was going to get in our way, but we didn't reckon with this little feisty, virus. So I just ended everything for 2 years. So we went from, perfect. Everything was traveling. It was all smooth and great to nothing. And we survived COVID, thank goodness. And this year I've traveled quite a bit. I've been to Europe 3 or 4 times in the last 6 or 8 months. And I think it's kind of like COVID roulette, to be honest, Lisa. We have about a 2% chance of somebody testing positive in COVID. And if you do, nobody's going to the hospital over there. But you just have to quarantine and wait until you're testing negative in order to ethically, I think, go on an airplane with a bunch of other people and fly home. Up until a couple of weeks ago, you had to get a negative test before getting on an airplane. It was required by our government, but now we've dropped that. But I've got a pretty good sampling because we've got 60 buses on the road right now filled with Americans. We've got 1,500 Americans traveling around Europe today. And we've been doing that for 2 or 3 months now. And every week we do a little tally and we find it's between 2 and 3% of our travelers are getting COVID. So it is kind of risky. And if you don't want to take that risk, I totally respect staying home and going next year. It'll probably get better. But I've taken the risk and I've had some great travels. And when you get to Europe, for me, the bottom line is you got that energy in the streets, the thing that we fall in love with about Europe, the passeggiata, people filling the piazzas, licking their gelato, the paseo, the beer halls, the pubs, all that sort of fun. It's there. People are kissing each other on the cheeks in Paris. People are packing into the piazzas in Rome. And I'm just so thankful for that.
Yeah, I was curious about the etiquette of wearing a mask or whether most people are comfortable not wearing their masks.
Right now, I think on both sides of the Atlantic, people have kind of said, well, if we're going to get it, we're going to get it. I don't buy into that. I think we should still be careful. And on our buses, we require people to wear a mask when they're on the bus. We don't let anybody on the bus who's not fully vaccinated and boosted. And when you go to museums, when you go in public transit, when you get into a taxi or an Uber in Europe, generally you wear a mask. I've always got my mask right here in my shirt pocket and I just pop it on. It's not a big deal. It's certainly not a political thing in Europe, And I just feel it's like wearing a scarf. When I'm on an airplane, I want to have a mask on. I don't care if it's required or not. It's just, I think, considerate to the person sitting next to me if I happen to be contagious. And it's smart for me if the person next to me is contagious and doesn't know it. So small price to pay. But I've been lucky. Thank God I haven't had COVID at all. And I've done a lot of things in Europe. But what I do is I choose places that are not likely to be filled with anti-vaxxers. Mm-hmm. If you go to a biker bar and it's down in a basement and there's no ventilation and you're there for 2 hours, you're living dangerously. Right. But if you go to a museum and you're wearing a mask, you're perfectly safe. People eat outdoors in Europe now. Part of it's because it's so darn hot over there. And also they've got their, what we call streeteries. In Germany, they call it Schanigarten. A Shani garden. And that's sort of a little bit of a ethnic joke on the Italians that do all the waitressing and waitering in Germany. They're typically Italian waiters called Gianni. So they call it a Gianni garden, Gianni garden. But that's eating outdoors in Germany. So people are more used to eating outdoors. I feel more comfortable eating in a well-ventilated space, you see. So I'm just really careful about ventilation, wearing a mask when it's smart, surrounding myself with people who are likely to be vaccinated. And I've been lucky.
Well, I'm so glad you're out there traveling again, encouraging other people to get out and travel again. I understand we have a clip to share with the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're about to see in this clip?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to share this, Lisa, because one thing I produced in the dark depths of COVID was a half-hour special called Why We Travel. And I just decided to write a love note to travel because we weren't traveling and we were missing it. And when I tried to kind of wrap it all up, I tried to figure out what is this all going to? And it is we connect It is so great to connect with other people, especially people who are not like us, that we wouldn't normally connect with, because then we're less fearful. And there's a lot of fear in this world today, and fear is a problem. So this is just the last 5 minutes of a 30-minute program that we've aired on KPBS and all over the country. And it is just part of my love note to travel, why we travel. Let's watch this.
By traveling thoughtfully, we connect. Even for those of us who can only travel as a state of mind, travel can result in a deeper connection. Travel connects us face to face with reality. It's not virtual. It's not through a viewfinder. Travel is candid, honest, being in the moment.
Okay? Thank you.
In a world hungry for authenticity, we yearn for connection.
But now she's quite big. She's like you, about like that, yeah.
Travelers connect with different cultures, different people. On the road, strangers are just friends we've yet to meet. Travel frees us from routine. It creates room for serendipity.
Okay, so now I'm ready to be a shepherd.
Serendipity leads to connections. Travel forces us to bend and to flex. It makes us more tolerant and inspires us to celebrate diversity. The lessons I've gained from exploring Europe, the land of my heritage, are universal. For me, these lessons are affirmed and then stretched when traveling further afield. As a child ventures beyond his backyard, I ventured beyond Europe. Year after year, I pushed my boundaries. The world opened wide with a montage of wonders and lessons learned. Traveling beyond my comfort zone, culture shock became constructive. The growing pains of a broadening perspective, my ethnocentrism challenged. The celebration of difference and oneness at the same time. The recognition that love is love in their home just as in mine.
I think this is a beautiful, beautiful welcome here.
Through travel, we see a world filled with joy, with compassion, and with good people. We learn the more we reach out, the more we receive. We learn that we all share the same world.
Nice.
And we all share the same window of time. Travelers seek bridges rather than walls. Every wall has two sides and two narratives. For one to be truly understood, both must be heard. Traveling, we realize the challenges of our future will be blind to borders and best overcome not by conflict and walls, but by community and bridges. There's so much fear these days. The flip side of fear? It's understanding. And we gain understanding when we travel.
What is this? The celebration of Obama's...
Travel is more than a holiday. It gives us new experiences, acts as our greatest teacher, makes our lives more meaningful, and connects us with a global family. We can't all travel physically, but anyone can live with a traveler's mindset. It's a choice. Travel makes us more comfortable with the world, our hearts bigger, and our lives richer. And it makes us happier. And that is why we travel.
Such an inspiring video to explain about what it is you do and why you do it. Thanks so much for sharing that with all of us.
It's my pleasure. And I just keep thinking, if everybody traveled, this world would be a better place. We'd get along with each other better. We'd give everybody a little more wiggle room. We'd have a little less fundamentalism. We'd respect people who think and see things differently, and they'd respect us.
In that video, I noticed how adept you are at immersing yourself in the culture and with the people of the places that you travel. How do you go about doing that so easily?
Well, you have to strive to become a temporary local. Now, that was a lot of when I looked at those shows, most of my travel is in Europe, which is sort of the wading pool for world exploration. I mean, if you want to go into the deep end, you go further afield. But my whole mission in my work is to inspire and equip Americans to venture beyond Orlando. You see, I just want them to try something new, and then they can go to the more challenging places. But if I look at what made the cut for that little bit, most of it was beyond Europe. It was Guatemala, Ethiopia, Iran, faraway places. I just think what you want to do, you don't have to go to those exotic places. You can go to Denmark and still have a broadening experience. But you need to be a cultural chameleon. You need to, and that's what I do. I physically change when I go from country to country. I don't drink tea here. It makes no sense to me. But in England, a spot of tea just feels right. I don't drink whiskey here, but when I'm in Scotland, every night I have a wee dram. It's just great, I don't drink wine in Czech Republic. I drink the best beer in Europe. And I don't drink beer in Tuscany. I drink the best wine in Europe. I eat escargot in Burgundy. I just love that. I never come home after a long day of work here in Seattle and crave a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. But when I'm on a Greek island, I don't let a sunset go down without a nice cloudy glass of ouzo to celebrate it. So you just get in the spirit of what the local people are doing. You take a sauna when you're in Helsinki, and you play boules when you're in a small town in France. It makes the travel go better. You spend less money, you learn more lessons, you have more friendly reception. It just makes sense.
Well, we welcome the participants in the crowd to give some questions in the question and answer box. And I feel like we should get to some of our questions that our attendees have submitted before the event. Let's go to this one from Kevin Gellenbeck. He says, hiking in Europe can be spectacular. What is the best way to make arrangements for an overnight stay in huts along the way?
Well, Kevin, that's a very important question, because there's a lot of people that want to go hiking in Europe and stay in these wonderful huts in the mountains. And you have to get reservations generally. And I was just hell-bent on hiking around Mount Blanc last year with my girlfriend. And I thought I could just make reservations for the huts along the way. And it was just overwhelming with the experience I've got. And I just decided to book a tour. It wasn't a conventional tour. It was a hiking tour that just arranges your mountain accommodations with dinner, and then what's called a Sherpa service that moves your bags from one hotel to the next. And then we'd hike, and every morning we'd leave our bag in the lobby, and every night we'd hike. After hiking all day, we'd get to this new place and have a wonderful dinner waiting for us, and our bags were right there in our room. So that's the kind of the hiking equivalent of glamping, glamorous hiking. And that's a beautiful thing to do. Otherwise, certainly you can make your reservations for one-off huts wherever you want to hike. Remember, you could hike from France all the way to Slovenia and never come out of the mountains, and every night stay in a mountain hut. It's pretty amazing. And I would remind you that a lot of times you need to book in advance, but a lot of times they're not open in advance, because they close down in the spring and the fall, and they're open during ski time, and they're open during hiking time. But you need to get reservations, and there are a lot of great hikes, and there are these venerable hikes. The hike that I did is called the Tour de Mont Blanc. It's a 100-mile, 10-day hike around Mount Blanc through France, Italy, and Switzerland. And I didn't go to the mountain top. Every day we spent the morning gaining 3,000 feet, going from about 5,000 feet to 8,000 feet. We'd have our picnic lunch at the ridge of the pass, and then we'd spend the rest of the afternoon hiking into the next valley where our hotel was waiting for us. And so every night, every day, we'd go up and over a mountain ridge as we went all the way around Mount Blanc. And we kind of cheated. We cherry picked the best 60 miles and 6 days out of the 10-day hike and used public transportation to connect through the more boring parts. And that's just an example of the hike you can do. So there are a lot of hikes. I'll be hiking for another week in the Berner Oberland, my favorite part of the Swiss Alps, this summer. I can hardly wait. It's what I'm going to do in August for a vacation. And I'll be enjoying writing about that. And it's funny because we do a lot of fun things on our TV shows. And over the years, two things have inspired me on my TV show to actually come back without the crew and do it like I'm on vacation. I love my work so much. I'm rarely on vacation. I just love working over there, and I've got a big responsibility. So rather than sit on the beach, I should be spending the day checking the hotels and the restaurants, and I usually do that joyfully. But when we filmed on a barge in Burgundy, in France a few years ago, I just thought, this is incredible. Gourmet food, gliding through the sunflower groves, walking to villages, cranking open the locks, this sort of lazy, beautiful year in Provence kind of wonder. And I thought, I got to do this. So we've booked a week on a barge. And then we filmed, faking like we were hiking around Mount Blanc with a person who's a friend of mine who's written a book about that. And it was so exciting just to even fake it. I thought, I got to come back and actually do it. So we did that. And now I'm kind of hooked on that.
So Nanda Mekta asks, what kind of hotel accommodations do you look for normally?
I look for places that are well located in the center, that are quiet at night, that are family run. If they're on a pedestrian only street, that's great. I don't need a fancy hotel. I like a 2-star hotel is good enough for me. I've got enough money to want a reasonable hotel, but I get nothing extra out of spending twice as much for a 4-star hotel. I just find it gets in the way. I'm out in the streets. I'm eating dinner far away. I don't want to eat. I don't like to eat dinner at the hotel. I spend very little time in the hotel, actually. I need a safe place. I need a place that really, I like a family-run place is good because it has caring people that are really there. They know their clientele and they have a staff that's there year after year. A corporate-run hotel pays miserable wages and people come and go, and a lot of staff is disgruntled and they're just in it to maximize their investment. So I really like the mom and pops. And I got to say, Lisa, one of the things that I'm so thankful for after 2 years of COVID, I thought, I've got 50 guidebooks covering every part of Europe. They're lovingly updated over 20 years. They're filled with personal relations between hoteliers and restaurateurs and my travelers and so on. And I was very worried that they wouldn't survive 2 years of no revenue. It's tough. But I found out that, the small family run hotels, they trimmed their sails, and the mom and pop were just in the trenches more than they normally would have been, perhaps. And local people couldn't travel, but they would patronize the family run businesses in their own communities. The governments helped out a little bit. And I found out that the places that suffered the most in a certain degree during COVID were the places that were totally dedicated to touristy places. And what I try to find is places that have a local clientele as well as a tourist clientele. And thankfully, my favorite places, because they have a local clientele, they survived a 2-year stretch with no international travelers. So those are the kind of hotels I look for. I really like small places. I don't like a big high-rise hotel if I can, traveling around the United States, just give me a forgettable, comfortable, efficient business class hotel with cookie cutter rooms. I don't care. But when I'm in a small town in Germany or Italy or Greece or Spain, I like a place with a little character. I like to get to know the owners and so on.
So we have another COVID question. Should we wait until the last minute to get a COVID test before boarding a cruise? And this is from Christine Evans.
The requirements change from month to month. So I hesitate to say what you should do. I would say when you are traveling anywhere, you should kind of self-quarantine the last week before you're flying home or before you're heading out, before you're getting on a cruise. Self-quarantine. Don't go to a bunch of parties just on the eve of a big trip. That's just kind of common sense. And if you're supposed to get a COVID test, usually the time limit is so close that you don't have much choice. They give you a 48-hour window or something like that. But we have when we have our tour program going now, I think I mentioned we have 60 buses on the road today. A couple of weeks ago, you had to get tests before you were allowed to get on an airplane heading for the United States. And we would encourage people to just really self-isolate the last 5 days, because if you do get that test, nobody's going to the hospital, but you are having to cancel your flight and extend your trip and self-quarantine, and it's kind of expensive and it's kind of a drag.
So we have another question from Jerry Patchett. We 4 seniors traveling to Europe for 3 weeks in April, May of next year. We'll be renting a car. Can we do southern France and Italy in that period of time? So 4 seniors traveling in 3 weeks in April and May of 2023.
April and May are a great time to be doing the southern part. The Mediterranean is very hot and it's very crowded. I don't remember when I can't even remember what I had for dinner last Tuesday. I don't even know what day it is today, I don't think. But I do know that every TV show I've ever done, if it's in the Mediterranean, it was shot in April or May. And every TV show I've ever done, and we've done like 150 of them for KPBS, that's in the Alps or north of the Alps would have been done in July or August. In other words, north of the Alps, I like the heat. I like the crowds. I want to go in the summer with the long days and the good weather. Scandinavia, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, you want vitality. You want people out there. If you go off season, it just kind of shuts down and there's just leaves blowing down empty lanes. But in the Mediterranean, it's so hot and crowded. It's just brutal. I was just in Madrid 2 weeks ago. It was in the 90s, and I suppose maybe you're used to that in Southern California, but for me up in Seattle, that's pretty darn hot. And I try to avoid that. Remember, Europe is not as accustomed to the heat as we are, and they're not as easy with their air conditioning. Germany doesn't even have air conditioning in a lot of hotels because until the last decade, they didn't really need it. And they're reluctant to have the air conditioning. Energy is very expensive in Europe compared to what we're used to. In Italy, there's laws that say you can't turn the heat on during a whole period in the fall until it gets really cold. And you can't turn the aircon on in the spring until it gets really hot. So there's a whole time in the spring and the fall when people are legally not allowed to heat or cool their hotels. A lot of Americans complain about that, but they're being ugly Americans. They don't know the context. And then we have cheap energy. They have very expensive energy. Even now we have cheap energy compared to Europe. So they're more careful about that. I think getting along, I'm a little long-winded here, but for those four friends that are going in April and May, they're seniors. I don't care if they're seniors or juniors. They're young at heart. It's best if you're, the most grueling thing about travel, if you're an older traveler, is the heat and the crowds of summer. So you're avoiding that. That's really good. And 4 people in a car is very economic. And if you want to get from A to B, anywhere in Europe, you just get on the freeway. If there's tolls, and there are tolls in France, and there are tolls in Italy, celebrate the tolls. There's 4 of you. It's peanuts because you're getting there safer and faster. You're probably saving as much on gas as the toll cost you if you were on a small road. So just zip from point to when you want to get from A to B, stay on the freeway. But remember, you got to get off the freeway to smell the roses, and you got to get out of the car. So, park the car and get out and walk. There's so much fun to be had.
So Harry and Janet Zanville write, is it possible to organize visits to Italian churches to listen to organ music practices? And if so, how can that be accomplished?
I've never heard of anybody making reservations to hear an organ practice. The church is open. They don't close the church during an organ practice. The organist just practiced. And I love to stumble onto a church with the organ playing and just sit down and enjoy it. It's like a casual concert. I'll never forget, after my 6-day hike around Mont Blanc, we're hiking into Chamonix. I got into the town, got to the square, and the organ was playing on the church. So we just went right into the church, sat down, and it was like an organ concert welcomed us back into civilization after a week up in the high country. It was just gorgeous. I suppose if you really wanted to be proactive, you could find out when does the organist practice, but I've never heard of anybody doing that. One thing I would remind you is there are lots of concerts in the great churches and concert halls in Europe, and in churches, they're often free. So when you go into a church during the day as you're sightseeing, and people go into churches because they're just cool, they're free, they're on the main square, they're big, and there's not much else to do sometimes. And when you're sightseeing, there's a lot of cool stuff inside the churches to see. Spend a moment in the narthex before you leave and look at the events board. And you'll be surprised how often you see every Tuesday night is a free concert, and it might be Tuesday. So you can take advantage of that. Also check in with the Tourist Information Office or their website, because there's a surprising amount of free musical entertainment in Europe if you know where to be.
So Pam wants to know if you can talk more about your independent tours.
My independent tours, I think what she might be referring to are we call them the My Way tours. And, our tour program is basically, we have 40 different itineraries. We take about 1,000 groups a year around Europe. This year, we're taking 800. I'm really thankful we're pretty much back in business after COVID. Most of the tours are fully guided. That means a guide, 25 people and a bus driver on a 50-seat bus. Most tour companies pack the bus because the profit is in the last people you put on the bus. But we want to have small groups. So we have a 50-seat bus with only 25 people on it. So we have to have a a good fill rate in order for us to be profitable. And even at that, it can be expensive to have a fully guided tour with all the admissions, and we include all the sightseeing and this and that, and there's all the tippings included and so on. What we do is we offer a more affordable version of our tours that's called My Way, and it's just the bus and breakfast and the hotels. And it comes with not a guide, but an escort. And the escort has office hours every morning after breakfast to make sure everybody knows what they're going to do. But it's free time for everybody. But you're tapping in on the efficiency of having one vehicle drive you around with a great driver, somebody getting all the hotels for you and your breakfast, and you got 20 or 25 people on the bus that you may or may not want to hang out with. So it's super efficient. You never have to worry about driving or parking or figuring out your hotels. And it's a lot cheaper than a fully guided tour. It's really good for people on a tight budget. It's really good for older travelers and travelers that have seen it already and they just want to do their own thing or at their own tempo or their own pace. It's really good for families. And we've produced so much information that people can actually be their own guides and save money if they want to be a do-it-yourself traveler.
Well, this ties into this next question from James Murphy. He says, I loved touring London while listening to your self-guided audio segments of the city. Are you planning to create more of these types of self-guided audio tours?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I was almost going to bring that in because, we can do our unguided tours because I've got tours of most of the important stuff on my app. And this is a free app. I just do it because I love to get more mileage out of the app, the tours that I've written for my guidebooks. And I've just tape recorded them or audio recorded them, and they're do-it-yourself tours. So you download the app, it's free. It's called Rick Steves Audio Europe, and it does two things. It collects the most interesting and appropriate radio interviews from my radio show that people enjoy on KPBS. Thank you, by the way, for running that. And what I've done is I've collected all the tours that would be of interest to somebody going to Ireland or Norway or Turkey or Sicily or Portugal or France. And I've collected them in country-specific playlists. And you can download whatever ones of those you want and listen to them offline when you're driving, when you're in a traffic jam, when you're on the airplane, when your partner's sleeping and you're still wide awake. And it's just fun to listen to all these great people I get to interview. But also on that app, which is near and dear to my heart, are 60 self-guided tours that I narrate, and people just stick me in their ear, like our listener just did in London. And then I get to guide you around through my favorite corners of that city. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 months updating 35 of the 60 tours on our app. And we've just got a big, right now, full court press with all my staff getting our guidebooks up to date and getting our audio tours up to date. But they work right now. I've done 35 of them, and I'm so pleased with how they're still right on. And we've got tens of thousands of people using them every day. And it's absolutely free. It's just called Rick Steves Audio Europe. So download it and play around with it, and it'll be your best friend while you're in Europe.
Here's a question from Christine. She says, on a Baltic cruise, what is the best way to get a small amount of local currency for markets and such?
That is a good question. You would go to an ATM machine. Problem with an ATM machine is you're going to get probably more money than you need, and you'll lose money when you change it back. But if you're going on a Baltic cruise, some of the countries are going to be, if you're going on a North European cruise up in Scandinavia, some of the countries will be Euro countries. Other countries will have their own crowns or whatever currency they've got. And if you do change too much of one currency, remember, when you're changing money, you want to change as accurately as you can. If you change too much and you change back, let's say you want to spend $50 and you change $100. Well, you've changed $100, you spend 50, you change back 50. You just changed $150 at a certain percentage loss to spend $50. That's triple as expensive as just changing $50 to spend $50, but nobody knows exactly what they want to spend. You can use your credit card. That's a very good idea. And more countries are using their credit cards. In Iceland, you hardly spend cash. It's amazing. They're so reliant on credit cards. You have a hard time using cash. Nobody wants cash, just credit cards only. But for the Baltics, you'll want local cash, and you'll go to ATMs, and you'll find that it's right at the cruise port. And just be careful not to change too much. Also, you can just go to change desks with dollars cash. If you bring a bunch of $20 bills with you, that might be your best bet.
Great. So Greg says, we're planning on a month in Ireland in the fall of 2023. Would you suggest finding one location as home base and then traveling about from there, or maybe 2 weeks in two different places?
So Greg's got 2 weeks for Ireland.
It says a month altogether.
A
So,
month. Oh, that's
so-
a luxurious amount of time. Yeah.
so-
I would watch my 4 shows on Ireland. You can watch them on Passport anytime you want. That's 2 hours. And that's what I would do if you had a month in Ireland. So you can see what I would do if you had a month. There's 2 hours right there. And then my Ireland guidebook has all the hotel and eating and specific information for that route. I would say in Ireland, you wouldn't want to stay in the same place. I think it's fun to be moving around. Every town has a different personality, different character, but it is nice not to have a series of one-night stands. I like to stay 3 or 4 nights in a stop, and I like to go to the same pub every night because then, the first night they say strangers are just friends who've yet to meet, and then the second night, you're the first night you're a guest, and the next night you're a regular. So I like that a lot.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
So Shoba asked, if you had the choice of knowing one more language besides English to enhance your vacation in Europe, which language would it be?
One more language. Well, that would double the number of languages I speak because I only speak English. Nothing to brag about, but I like to make that point clear because a lot of people just assume I speak a bunch of languages because I'm adept at travel. But I'm sort of a classic American monoglot. We got to remember we speak the world's linguistic common denominator. If a Estonian meets a Norwegian, how do you think they communicate? I mean, there's 4 million people that speak Norwegian and 1 million people that speak Estonian. They speak in English, broken English. We speak the language that works. So the trick is to choose young or well-educated or people in tourism. They're the ones that are likely to speak English. Remember, the countries that have the small languages, Bulgaria, Portugal, Latvia, they're more likely to have people speaking English than French, Italian, and Germans. Because if you're French, you got a big world speaking your own language. If you're Italian, you got a big world. If you're Spanish, you got a huge world. But if you are Norwegian, you got a small world, and you got to learn another language. So they have the imperative to learn another language, and if they're smart, they learn English because that gets them the most mileage. So I'm just beating around the bush. If I had to choose one language to learn, I love Italian just because I love Italy. But from a practical point of view, I think I would learn Spanish because that would give me the most mileage throughout Latin America. Of course, it'd be great in Spain, it'd help in Portugal. And it would also give me an advantage for other Romance languages like Italian.
Great. Jody asks, if I don't wish to travel alone, but don't have a travel partner, how can I find the right group or tour to go with? I want to experience the culture and highlights without packing too many things in or doing cheesy touristy things. So that's what Jody wants to know.
Jody, okay. Well, if you're alone, I like to, it's more fun to travel with people to share the fun, but you also have your independence, which is beautiful when you're alone. If you take a tour, typically when you take a tour, if you're alone, you have to pay quite a bit more to get single supplement. And a lot of people are upset with the tour company about that, but you can't be upset with the tour company about that because the tour company is putting you in a 2-bedroom room and you're one person. So they can't take another person on the tour. So you're really expensive. You're bad news for that tour company. We give people an opportunity to pay extra to have a single room because that's what you have is a single supplement option. But what we do that other tour companies don't normally do is we just team up strangers. Okay, so just women together and men together. But anybody can sign up they can sign up alone without paying a single supplement, and then they go potluck on who they're going to share a room with. And half the time you get a single room just because of the numbers and you don't have to pay for it. So that's kind of a fun game to play. But usually we have 4 or 5 single women on a tour of 25 people. And if there's 5 single women, there'll be 3 twin rooms, and they sort it out. And our tours are kind of easygoing that way. But otherwise you could try to find yourself a travel partner. Otherwise you could go to places, if you're a student or a backpacker or roughing it, you go to a place that only charges per bed. A youth hostel only charges per bed. A mountain hut only charges per bed. So you don't have that disadvantage. But it can be expensive to be a single traveler who's not willing to share a room with another stranger when you're traveling.
So speaking of Italy, Harry Zanville has a couple of questions. Is Ravenna, Italy worth visiting if we have only one day there? And is it Ravenna or
Yeah,
Rena?
it's Ravenna.
Ravenna.
It's about an hour south of Venice. And most people go to Ravenna. The only reason people go to Ravenna that I know is to see the amazing mosaics there. If you're really into ancient art, this is from the 5th century. This is the last of the Roman art, the first of the medieval European art. This is where you see in the same church Jesus with no beard, like in Roman times, and Jesus with a beard, like in medieval times. It's on the cusp, you see. And it is exquisite art. So if you really want to see that and appreciate that, it is worth the trip. And it's a nice town, Ravenna. But if you're just a casual sightseer, you'll be much better off staying time in Venice and making a point to appreciate the old Byzantine mosaics in Venice. There's wonderful mosaics in Venice, and you wouldn't need to go to Ravenna. So I can't say go there or don't go there, but I would just remind you, for most people, if they spent a quarter of the energy and time that they would spend getting to Ravenna to see mosaics, if they invested that time in Venice, where they probably are already going, and really do the mosaics first class, that'd be a more efficient use of their time and money.
And Harry also asked about Italy. They're thinking of paying to test drive Ferrari and Lamborghini cars in Italy. Have you done this? And if so, what was your experience?
No, but I'd love to hear how it goes, Harry. Do it and send me an email. I'd love to interview on my radio show. That sounds like fun.
I've noticed that you don't drive a lot. Is that by choice that you choose not to do a lot of driving?
No, it's probably because I appreciate the efficiency of the trains. If I'm going from city to city to city, I don't want a car. There's this notion that some people want to have a car to drive from Salzburg to Munich to Vienna to Prague to Budapest. You don't want a car for that. If you're just going from city to city, you hop on the train. We don't know what a train system is here in the United States. I mean, I live in Seattle, and when I want to go to Portland by train, there's 3 trains a day, and each of them is going to be a couple hours late. If I was in Europe, there'd be 2 trains an hour, 150 miles an hour, and you could set your clock by them, and it'd be cheap, government subsidized. So I'm enamored with the efficiency and the fun and the speed of the European train system. And I generally go from city to city to city. But if I'm doing the countryside, if I'm doing Scotland and the Isle of Skye, I want a car. I don't want to wait around for the meager transportation in sparsely populated corners like that. That's where you rent a car. So what you want to do is you want to look at first of all, if you're packing, if you're packing heavy, you don't want to take the train. You really want to rent a car, because then it doesn't matter. You can rent a trailer. I mean, you can take everything and not suffer because you got your own wheels. But if you're going by train, you better pack light to be mobile, because you do a lot of walking. If there's a group of you, 4 people in a car, like some people called earlier, that's more economic than 4 people buying 4 train tickets. 1 or 2 people go cheaper by train. 3 or more generally go cheaper by car. I started my business taking 8 people around Europe on minibuses, because that's super cheap. And it was also super profitable, because it's so cheap to get a minibus. And I had 8 people in the minibus sharing the cost of the transportation. So factor all of that in. But most importantly, remember, if you are going from city to city, you don't want a car. It's very expensive to park it. And there's a lot of traffic jams getting in and out of the cities. You would never use it while you're in the city. So you're paying to rent it double. You're paying to rent the car and paying to park it. But if you're in the countryside, that's where you enjoy the car. I would look at countries and do them in 2 overlays. You can do Italy, you can do Venice, Florence, Rome, and Milano by train, and then pick up a car at the airport in Rome and drive around in the countryside of Tuscany and Umbria, and then drop the car back. You can do in England, what I like to do is do London, go out to Bath, do Bath, pick up a car in Bath instead of in London, and then do all your countryside tooling around through the Cotswold villages and Cumbrian Lake District and so on, and then drop the car when you get to York. Do York and take the train to London. So then you did your 3 big cities, London, Bath, and York, without the car, and you had the car for all the fun stuff, the countryside of Wales, and that would just be wonderful. But that's the smart use of a car. Remember, you can pick up and drop a car in different towns. It's free usually if it's in the same country, but you'll pay a fee if you do it in a different country.
Great. So Eileen wants to know, do you have any tours that incorporate cooking lessons, or can you recommend how to plan a tour that includes cooking?
Yeah, cooking is so popular. If you want to, we've learned when we're always trying to promote our tours, and the best way to promote the tour is say experiences. And we say that anyways, because we're always about experiences. That's what sells now. People, they want experiences, and cooking is one of those. And I have really become a believer in the smart use of group time by having a cooking lesson. I just love it. You go to a chef, and you go, sometimes you go to the market and help shop, and then you go and you cook it, and then you sit down and you eat what you cooked, and it's so fun. And we do that with our groups in Florence. We do it in a number of our tours, but we do it because it's a great experience, and we do it because everybody wants to do it once. We do not do tours that are that kind of a specialty. Our tours are kind of the generic, this is the best experience we can offer you for 12 days in Spain or whatever. One thing I would remind you, there all over Europe, there are wonderful, loving, charismatic, energy-filled, passionate chefs that love to share their food and teach people how to cook it and enjoy it. And you'll find, if you do your reading, that you'll find these places all over Europe where they'll actually meet you in the town on the square, and they'll drive you up to their farmhouse. And then, you spend a little time cooking and drinking, and then you sit down and you have a great dinner, and then they drive you back down to the town. I'm thinking about a place up in Lake Como, and you find that all over Europe. And also, for people who like food, one of my favorite things to do these days is food tours. That's one thing I'm really into. A food tour costs about $80 or $100, and it lasts about 4 hours. And you usually go to 8 places, and it's a meal. It's 4 hours of entertainment. You do it with 6 or 8 other tourists, and you go to 8 different hole-in-the-wall places with a entertaining local guide, and it's a meal. You get $40 worth of food and drink, and then you get and it's just it's sort of a tour for your taste buds. And I do it because it's fun. I enjoy the social fun with the other tourists on there, and I also do it to learn for my guidebooks. So I'll take food tours in every city, and I'll just learn little tips and notes that I can put into my book. And then, when somebody goes to Lisbon, I know just what they should do for their little bit of firewater and their little bit of cod in the bar and so on.
Jim Bowersox asks, how did you select Bread for the World for your charity? So this sort of ties in with food too. And let's talk about your philanthropy a little bit.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, my philanthropy kind of does come out of my travels, because I used to travel without enough money. I used to crash anywhere I could to sleep for free, and I would always come home malnourished. And I'm just a privileged white person who gets to go to Europe for his vacation. And I realized, wow, for a lot of people, that's the lifestyle, not knowing where your roof's going to be over your head, and not having enough food. And I want to make a difference. And I just think there's so much affluence in this country. Anybody that's able to plan a European vacation has enough financial wherewithal to help out. And 10% of humanity is trying to live on $2 a day. That's extreme poverty. And that's bumping way up with the problem that the war in Ukraine is causing, with the cost of grain doubling in Africa now, because of what's the dislocation of the economy in Ukraine and Russia. So what I like to do is do what I can in my little way to make a difference. And different people have a different ethic about how they want to make a difference with their philanthropic dollar, whether it's $100 or $1,000 or $100,000. It doesn't matter. Everybody just needs to help the way they can. But you want to get the most traction. You want to get the most mileage out of it. And you can do a lot by, there's a lot of different ways to help, obviously, but with food aid, just by giving a food bank some money, and that's great. But what I like to do is look at the root cause of that hunger. And I understand it is policy driven. It's structural poverty, because a government is not doing what it could to create an environment where hungry people can get food. And it's not just, paying people to not work or anything like that. There is structural poverty. There's structural poverty in the developing world, and there's structural poverty right here in the United States. So what I like to do is support an advocacy organization. Advocacy is advocating for something. The NRA, if you like guns, the NRA is an advocacy organization. They lobby for gun rights. My passion is not guns, it is helping feed hungry people. And the equivalent would be Bread for the World in Washington, D.C. It's, as far as I know, the most effective advocacy organization. And legislators want to do the right thing. But when they sit down at a table and all they have is people lobbying for corporations, they get pushed to do the thing that doesn't help the person that can't afford a lobbyist. Of course, poor people don't have money to lobby for their interests, but Bread for the World does, and it's supported by caring people. It's a Christian organization. It fits my Christian values, but it's also a very practical organization. They get it done. I really believe the best place I can put my money is to empower Bread for the World to speak up for all of us who care about hungry people in the halls of Congress. So that's one of my that's my favorite sort of charity, is just to motivate our government to have policies that are mindful that when you have a trade policy, it has an impact on people that will never see their name on a plane ticket, people who are struggling to feed their families on $2 a day. I was so thankful, Lisa, to be able to produce our Hunger and Hope show that aired on PBS, KPBS, which was using Guatemala and Ethiopia as a classroom to learn about why there is hunger in a world with so much wealth. It was so great to be able to learn about that and then share it on public television, because on public television, we can respect the intellect of our audience, we can assume an attention span, and we can make programming that's not driven by a need to keep advertisers happy, because we don't have advertisers. We can push programming and celebrate programming that just inspires and equips us to reach out and embrace the world in all its diversity and to be better citizens, both locally and globally.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being so dedicated to providing not only content for public television, but for public radio as well. We've all been listening and watching for years and years, and appreciate you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts for everybody before we wrap up this hour of Insider with Rick Steves?
Well, thank you. It's been such a delight to be with you. And I wish I could be there in person to see everybody and shake hands and get some photographs and autographs, talk travel. But this has been a great way to celebrate the value of public broadcasting. And I am so thankful for public broadcasting, both as somebody who makes programming in radio and TV, and as somebody who's raised kids with quality programming, and somebody who just appreciates to have that oasis on the dial that is not commercial driven. I mean, commercial stuff is fun, but it's nice to have one place that is higher than that. I've been thinking a lot about what's going on in our country with all the division and all of the wedge issues and all of the anger and the fear. And I just firmly believe that if everybody had the opportunity to travel and hang out with people who are different than them, we would have a better world. We would have a whole different political environment in our society, that's for sure. Think of the fear in our society. And then remember, we've never been more fearful than we are right now. People didn't used to say, have a safe trip. They used to say, bon voyage. Back when it was more dangerous to travel. There's no doubt it was more dangerous to travel when people said bon voyage. Now it is safer to travel, but we've got media, we've got social media, we've got division that always has an angle, and news that has an agenda, and people that are less exposed and threatened by different things. And I really believe that fear is for people who don't get out very much. And the flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. So that's my little niche. I'm so thankful to have KPBS to help me share my passion for becoming a better citizen of this planet, getting out there and making friends with the rest of the family.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Rick, for providing the KPBS members this very special opportunity to hear from you. You can watch Rick Steves Europe most Saturday afternoons at 4 p.m. on KPBS TV. Rick's many TV specials can also be watched, including the new one, upcoming one on art, right? And that could be watched most days on KPBS Create and KPBS2. You pretty much can't watch one of those channels and not run into a Rick Steves episode, which is what I love about KPBS. Also, we have the popular radio program Travel with Rick Steves, which you can hear on my radio station Sunday nights at 7 on KPBS FM. Public media stations like this would not exist without support from members just like you. So thank you so much. We have more Directors Club and Producers Club events coming up later this year. Please look out for more information about them in your email box. It's been great to connect with all of you, and I hope you can join us for many more member events just like this one. So again, thank you to Rick Steves, and thank you to each one of you for being here tonight. Thank
Happy
you.
travels.